wage love, grow liberation. No makes the way for your yes. Yes is a future. Resilience is our birthright. Ooh, ah, wow, how is one way of shaping justice pleasurably. Affirm survival, affirm brilliance, affirm resistance. And good people, if you think this moment isn't about you or your love or your family, you are wrong. These are just some of the world-making sensibilities of which I am so grateful that the Brown sisters have offered up over the course of their work on pleasure, survival, undoing, reimagining, and holding on to one another while we do.
That was the voice of Misty DeBerry from Dartmouth College. Autumn and I were recently invited to Dartmouth College on Zoom, obviously, to do a live show with the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies program. Misty was the moderator, and the event was organized by Mingwei Huang and a team including Bevan Dunbar, Catherine Durag, Devora Greenberg-Koling, Jody Davi, and Darshana Griggs. We were honored to bring the show to them, and now here we are, bringing it to you.
Hey, y'all!
Hey, everybody. How y'all doing? I want y'all to know that, like, I don't get dressed up anymore because it's, pandemic, but I'm wearing a skirt. And so if you can see, I'm wearing this, like, new leopard print pleated skirt thing. And I just wanted to show that off.
I'm not going to show what I'm wearing on the bottom, but I'm glad that you did.
Anyway, I haven't dressed up in so long, sister. I'm so glad to be dressed up and speaking to you.
I am so glad to be speaking to you and only dressed up from the top half. And yeah, fuck respectability.
Fuck respectability. Yes. I love. Okay, so sister, can I just ask briefly how you are?
Well, I feel that, like many people around the world right now, I'm having increasingly a more and more difficult time every day answering that question.
Yeah.
I think just to be, fully here and transparent about how I'm doing, I think I'm managing there's some dissociation happening inside my body, right? There's some way that I'm, that I'm kind of dissociating through my days right now. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is to really honor that thing that my body does sometimes, right? To be like, oh, yeah, actually, thank you, my body. Thank you, my body, for giving me a little bit of putting a little bit of a porous wall between me and whatever is happening right now.
Yes, sister.
So I'm hydrated. I've been eating vegetables, and I've been doing this. You and I are doing this together, but the folks who are in this room don't know that yet. But we've been doing this sugar detox, and I'm noticing, just feeling, the combination of, like, I feel so much better in my body right now because of the fact that I've just taken processed sugars out of my body. While also noticing, like, all the other things that happen when you do a sugar detox, which is like, resurfacing of old memories, dreams that are quite intense, all the things are also happening. But all that is to say that, I'm here. I do feel like I'm here. I'm as close to here as I can be, and very pleased to be here. And also, there's a part of me that's still kind of offline.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna let her,
yeah,
be where she is. That's where she needs to be. How are you?
Yeah. I'm really moved by your check-in, and I feel a lot of like depth and respect for that, right? I feel like I've also been through the pandemic, particularly leaning into gratitude for the fact that I'm like, I know how to numb myself. Sometimes that is useful. So that might be a new song. That might be a new hit in your Instagrams. But yeah, I feel today I woke up feeling a lot of dread energy, and what I have noticed a lot lately is that even if I'm not reading the news, which I often don't, I don't run towards the news at the beginning of my day. I kind of let the news find me, as it were. But even if I don't run towards it, there's still the emotional impact that the news is having. As an empathic person, I feel it. And so, like, when I glance over, I'm like, oh, look at the Senate pushing along this, totally wrong person to the Supreme Court. Look at that. Here comes another debate where it's just going to be like another platform given to a racist, fascist, evil person to speak to the people that like him. And, I really, I'm like, no. So I feel the dread of all those things. But inside of that, I do feel the good news of I've been really being good to my body. I've been letting people take good care of me and asking for support and help, asking for like energetic blessings. And like my turtle is here, Nalito, and today Nalito started climbing up the side of their house and falling down, and then climbing back up and falling down. And it's just
for anyone who's wondering, Nalito does have their own Instagram. Just
Nalito has their own Instagram. Nalito the Great. It's true. I'm that kind of person now. Never expected that.
No. And none of us expected that either about you.
No one expected that, especially Adrienne. So the turtle being it's Nalito the Great.
Nalito
okay?
the Great.
But the turtle being here is kind of helping me through all this moment, because the turtle is just like, whatever your concerns are, I have my own concerns here. I need to eat. I need to be taken out of my house so I can poop. And then I need to be returned to my house so that I can sleep for 22 hours. And I will need that again tomorrow. And it's just like slow, slow, slow. And so whenever I'm moving too fast, I literally go over and just take a look at turtle. I'm like, I could be sleeping right now, and that would be a relevant way to be alive and exist. That would be relevant. That would be relevant, right? I think the nap ministry has some wisdom on this, right? There's sleep is a relevant option. And yet I'm choosing to not sleep and to do things. Wow. I'm basically a superhero right now.
Right.
I feel like literally anyone who is doing anything other than resting and looking out the window in panic is like a maze. So yay, everybody. Because this moment is politically potent.
This moment is politically potent.
It is.
In ways that are certainly can feel very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think one of the places that we wanted to begin our conversation in earnest with you all today was to really do some context setting.
Yeah.
About, what is the political potency of this moment? And we have noticed for ourselves that, even for those of us who have been in social justice movements and doing organizing work for many years, it can be very easy in the current environment to lose sight of the conditions that have brought us to this time.
Yes.
And so occasionally it is very helpful to sort of, find that 30,000 foot view of our conditions, of the circumstances, and, to understand what about what's happening represents our victory. Yes. And what about what's happening represents our failure. That's and how right. do we be with the complexity of that? So, that's right. Adrienne, I'm wondering if you can kind of take us there first, that if we can move into understanding why is this moment so politically potent?
Yeah.
And then how do we use that framework or that context for figuring out what our work is right now?
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I have been really sitting in, I was away for the first half of this year. And so I came back in and it was like, whoa, like so much is moving and so fast. And conversations, literally like conversations like when I left the country that would not have seemed possible are now the central headlining conversations. They're part of the presidential debates. Defunding the police is coming out of people's mouths on national network television. So I was like, what happened? And I think one of the things I always try to challenge is people like, just overnight, like magically, like abolition. And it's like, no, that's not what was happening. We have been abolitionists since slavery. We have been trying to get free since slavery. And when I say we, they're particularly Black people. But there's also a huge effort and a huge solidarity that has been emerging and growing and weaving and challenging with Indigenous people, with immigrants, with Muslims, with everyone who's coming and building and being hated and responding and pushing back and overlapping with each other. There's this large we. And what we've been recognizing is like, oh, people of color is kind of a white way of looking at what the we is, right? It's like, y'all who are not white, you are in trouble, girl. And it's like, no. There's so much nuance and so much movement building and so much framework and analysis and alignment that has been happening. And when Black Lives Matter pushed up and Me Too pushed up and these movements start to really push up and be like, wait, you will no longer treat us this way. We will track it. We will call it in. We will pull it down. We will destroy these infrastructures. That pressure has been building. And then we come into the Trumpian political age where farce is politic, where it's all entertainment, where it's all a show. And so I think it's taken us a couple years to figure out, like, how do we intersect with the big show, right? Like we were still trying to do politics while we had someone doing a reality TV show and trying to play the game, like, how do we do this? Oh, it's false news, it's fake news. People don't care, right? But it's fake. Like, it's not even real. No, we don't care. And I think it's been the lineage, right, of those of us who are organizers for years saying, here's the facts. Here's the facts about the climate. Here's the facts about how we're being killed by the police. Here's the facts. And then the same response, we don't really care about the facts. So the response to fake news is the same thing, just a little flip side, right? We don't care if it's true, false. We don't care about that. Is it entertaining? And can we make money? Right? Those are two fundamental aspects of our current popular cultural space. So then I think into that moment, particularly Black organizers brilliantly said, let's put on a fucking show. Let's put on a show. And took to the streets, started pushing these actions in a moment when everyone's home, everyone's out of sight. And it was just like, we're getting killed no matter what. Even in a pandemic, when no one's out in the street, you find a way to murder us. So we will fight back. We will take to the street and fight back. And you were right in the heart of it all, in the uprisings. So I would love to pivot it back to you for a moment. I'll get back to like how I think people find their way in this, but I would love to just hear from you, like, when you look at that moment, being in the center of the pandemic, and then all of a sudden this uprising is happening, like, what was so potent in Minneapolis that opened the door?
Yeah. That's such a good question. I mean, I think there's a combination of things that were happening in Minneapolis, and one of those is the outrageous murder of George Floyd, filmed, was only 14 blocks away from where I live. That was the third of three murders by police that have happened in a very short span of time in Minneapolis. And I mean, I'm sure there are more actually that have gone unreported, but we had 3 major inflections in Minneapolis around police murder. And Jamar Clark and Philando Castile being the other 2 that happened really just I believe that all of that has happened in the last 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And so there has been an intense amount of just on the ground grassroots organizing around the concept of abolition and defunding the police here in Minneapolis, particularly led by a couple of organizations here locally, one called MPD 150, that they published a report just a few years ago looking at 150 years of policing in Minneapolis, and really making a very grounded assessment, a grounded data and evaluation based assessment of why policing does not work, right? That's rooted in an abolitionist politic, but also rooted in the data, right? That like, here's what the Minneapolis Police Department has done from then until now. And so I think that has laid the groundwork. There's been really interesting organizing work happening by a coalition called Reclaim the Block here, by our Black Visions collective here in Minneapolis as well.
Which you had done a lot of work supporting.
Right. I've interfaced with many of these groups in different ways over the last few years. And
shout out to facilitators, y'all.
Shout out to facilitators. And certainly I was doing work with Black Visions Collective on their movement strategy over the year, over the last year leading up to the uprising. And so just really badass organizers here in the Twin Cities. And in these coalitions, I want to also note that many of these coalitions are intergenerational, right? So like huge shout out of this moment, I think does go out to young organizers and new organizers. And there's a layer here that I think is important to uplift, that organizations like MPD 150, for instance, are intergenerational. And that offers that critical lens of having a longer view and being able to work with the complexity of the necessity of multiple organizing approaches, right? So I think all of that there was kind of a groundswell already happening. And then there was the murder of George Floyd in the midst of this pressurized situation of the pandemic. And I think that one of the things that happened in that first week after his murder, as the uprising was unfolding, is that particularly for those of us in South Minneapolis who are living through our neighborhood being turned overnight into a war zone, National Guard coming in, helicopters overhead, gunfire, tear gas, constant, assault. We had to very quickly adapt to conditions where it was literally not safe or possible to call on the police. And there was a really beautiful network that opened up of mutual aid and block by block organizing, like block by block safety-based organizing, especially because we did have, white supremacists coming in from outside of the Twin Cities, both from, the surrounding, some of the rural areas in Minnesota, but also from other states as well. We had people coming in who were intentionally infiltrating the protests and starting fires, initiating, we have, there's video recordings of, white men dressed in all black outfits, bashing windows and going inside and setting fires inside of businesses. It's all really well documented, right? And so there was a need for this block by block organizing work. And frankly, I think, in addition to all of the organizing that was already happening, that was guiding our city more in the direction of considering alternatives to policing, the fact that we suddenly had this experience of having to rely on each other instead
Yes.
of being able to rely on the state, I think something really shifted for people.
Yeah.
And I think this is that combination that as organizers, we know that this happens, right? That it's never, it's not that change happens overnight.
Yeah.
And it's not that change is slow.
Yeah.
It's always a combination of those realities, right? It's like
Right.
there's slow, methodical, plotting, sometimes demoralizing work that happens in community for years and years. And then when the conditions are ripe, something else becomes possible. And I think what's happened for us in Minneapolis is that conditions were ripe. And so something else became possible here, which is why the city council made the move that they made. Now, it's going to be a long fucking road to get us to the place where we actually can, effectively organize a different model. But our conditions changed.
That's great.
Our conditions changed. Yeah.
That's great. And I'm grateful you walked us through that, because I think that understanding how to harness a potent moment is a key part of figuring out the work we need to do at any time. And I feel like in moments like that, we really understand something that I've been saying for years, like I'm a post-nationalist. And what I mean by that is I don't believe it's my duty to save this nation from itself. It was never constructed with me in mind. It has never been loyal to me. And it's so manipulative. So it's constantly trying to convince me that the American US project is my political home project, and then showing me that it's not, right? Because I lean on it, I invest in it, I show up and I do tons of electoral organizing, all this stuff. And then no, we still will not keep you safe. No, we still will not even allow you to make choices with your own body. No, we will continue to push you in harm's way. So when I say I'm a post-nationalist, that doesn't mean I give up on the people. So for me, it's moments like what happened in Minneapolis this summer, where you start to see us as people moving towards a compelling future for ourselves, a compelling future that is beyond the boundaries of this nation, the thought boundaries and the physical boundaries, that we start to move towards our values. And our values are often abolitionist and socialist, even if we don't want to put those labels on it yet, right? That we're like, we want to move beyond prisons and we want to live in a place where we all have what we need, and that the people, the society is at the center of it. So it feels like the potency of this moment is we've lived in a heightened degree of recognizing this country is not for the people. This country is for the profit. And if we want something different to happen, we have to be for the people. We have to have movements that are for the people. Yes. And so that's one of the potent aspects of this moment. I think one of the other pieces is how to deal with the white supremacists and the patriarchies and patriarchal people and the haters. And, I've been revisiting James Baldwin and revisiting Audre Lorde and revisiting all these different thinkers and revisiting Martin Luther King Jr. And, just really sitting in like what we always know, which is we live on this small planet and we have not figured out how to oust anyone from it. So we are here, and
the technology just hasn't caught up with us yet.
We can't figure it out. Like, we should send them somewhere else, but there's nowhere else, right? There's nowhere else. And so I keep having this moment, because people are like, when you try to practice being compassionate in public, then folks are like, well, what about the most extreme? Like, what about the white supremacist rapist guy? What about that? When every time you talk about abolition, it's always like, what about the worst example of humanity? Right. And I really feel like it's not our job to save those who don't love us, but it is our job to save what we love. And because we live on this planet and we love this planet and we love so many of the people on this planet, we have to recognize that our liberation is tied up with those who don't love us. And we have to have strategies around that, right? Yeah. Because we can't save what we love by ignoring them. We can't save what we love by hoping they'll just disappear. And I feel like this year has been a year of that reckoning of like, oh, like in some brilliant world, we would just go to like some Wakanda where like mixed race people could also be there. And like, it would be great. And
let me in.
Wakanda with me. And then, but also it's like, it's more complicated than that, right? Even, I think about this throughout Black movement, throughout Indigenous movement, throughout every movement of oppressed peoples, we are interconnected with white allies, white people, white partners, white parents, white people, right? And so there's same thing with men, same thing with other spaces. We're not separate from. So I keep thinking of like, what does it look like to develop strategies that allow us to deeply love ourselves and figure out what the right relationship is, that it keeps inviting those who currently position themselves as our enemies into right relationship, right? Not just with us, but with their own miraculous existence, right? Because when I look at that, I'm like, you are out of alignment with your own miraculous existence.
Word.
You were not born into this world to hate me. That's not your purpose. How did you get so far off purpose? And I think the ways we do our teaching, our education, all of the podcasts that are coming out is one way. I think direct action, the kind of direct action people have been taking all summer, really confronting white supremacy head on and being like, you are not welcome here. We will not pretend this is a dialogue. We will directly confront and push this back. We will tear down the monuments. We will not uplift this. I think that's one way. I think building alliance. And I really respect those people who are building alliance with folks who still say racist things all the time. I feel like I'm mostly around white people who are like, I am paying attention. I am not saying the thing that is, and I am like, I've basically removed myself from the microaggressive landscape for the most part. It still happens occasionally.
So excellent.
Right?
So excellent.
But most of us don't have that, that capacity, that privilege to be able to make that full move, right? Like I know that's, so I really honor the people who are in those alliances, doing those interventions. And the last thing I'll say on this, because I have a big question I want to ask you, but I think there's a sort of triangle, like that has 3 points on it that creates a sweet spot for finding the work you can do in this moment.
Ooh.
Right? So I think the first thing is, what do you love? What do you love? Because that's what you're trying to protect. That's what you're trying to hold. That's what you're trying to, that's what should be pulling you forward. That's what's compelling. What do you love? That will nourish you. You will never, never, never have to worry about like, am I getting this enough, that enough? It's like, no, I love this. That'll drive you. The second question is, what are you actually skilled at? What are you actually skilled at? Right? So a lot of people show up for stuff they love and I'm like, but you don't actually know how to do that. So that's not really that right? You don't know how to do that.
You don't know how to do that.
Right? Like what you just shared is like the mutual aid of people offering from their skill and from what they actually had to offer. When everyone does that, we have everything we need, right? So really offering from your skills. And then the third piece of it is, what does your community need? What does your community need? So what do you love? What are you skilled at? And what does your community need? And I think if you find that spot in the middle, that's your sweet spot where you can be a relevant offer into this politically potent moment.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I also think, well, go ahead.
Well, because I have a question for you, sister, because this is like this moment. The other thing that has been helping me, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, are like, this moment is really overwhelming, but it's definitely not the worst moment of all time, right? It's definitely not like the worst moment that our lineages have faced. And so when I look and feel my way back through slavery and the Holocaust and genocides of Indigenous people here, and even more recently through Jim Crow, through patriarchy, I think our ancestors survived all of that. And there's so much that they know that if they know it, we know it.
Yeah.
Right? If they know it, we know it, but we have to access it. So my question to you would be, what lessons of ancestral survival feel particularly important to uplift to make the most of this political potential moment?
God, I love this question. I love this question.
Yay.
You're so smart.
Thanks.
I think one of the most important lessons that I've been able to glean just as a student of history and as someone who, really strives to be accountable to the lineage of my ancestors.
Yes.
Is that what it was required for our ancestors to survive the things that our ancestors survived, is a belief in a future that is beyond what we can see.
Uh-huh.
And a willingness to act on behalf of that future, knowing that that future may never actually be experienced by the person who's taking those actions.
Yeah.
And I think that we tend to think of that kind of belief or activity as, being visionary, and it is visionary.
Yeah.
It's also deeply pragmatic, right? And I think sometimes we forget that it's not all about vision. It's also about living in reality, right? That I think it's also about
I think being visionary is pragmatic, but I've been trying to make that case forever.
Right. Yeah. It's both. But I think that I think about, I'm gonna try to make a connection here, so just go with me.
Oh, I'm excited.
You were talking about the farce as politic.
Yes.
Right? And I think that this is such a good place for us to notice what the pattern is historically, right?
Yes.
That the farce as politic, it's problematic on the face of it, but it's also problematic because it keeps us distracted from the actual political project of white supremacy, which is alive and well, right? It's not, I don't subscribe to the belief that many people have that like this is the death knell of white supremacy. White supremacy is alive and well. And white supremacy as a system and as an ideology is highly adaptive.
Yes.
And it's elegant. I always say to my students, like, if only it were in service of something good, because it's so good at what it does, right? Yes. and it's been very functional for hundreds of years. And I think that we have to do the same thing that our ancestors had to do, right? Which is to recognize all of the ways that we, are gaslit into white supremacy, all of the ways that we, drink the Kool-Aid of white supremacy, all of the ways that we believe in parts of it in order to remain functional inside it, that actually reinforce both the system itself and also reinforce its power inside of us and over our bodies and over our hearts and minds. So, for our ancestors who were enslaved, there was an ideology that governed enslavement, right? An ideology that was operative for white people and also was operative for Black people, because there was some level at which you had to subscribe to the ideology in order to survive that experience, right? Mm-hmm. And so our ancestors who took the incredible risk of becoming fugitive from that system, they had to make a mental, emotional, spiritual leap in order to do something like that, right? Yes. And to basically decide, I'm going to believe more, as Alexis Pauline Gumbs would say about Harriet Tubman. I believe in my freedom more than I believe in those systems that say I am not free, right? So, and so we needed both, right? We needed both the people who stayed enslaved and stayed inside the system in order that we survive. And we also needed those who were willing to become fugitive from that system so that we could be free. We needed both, right? So what is the need in this moment? I think if we look at that farce, like the political farce, we have to recognize that that is also an element of the project of white supremacy. And we have to have that both, again, where we have the people who are willing to engage with that farce because they know that some level of relationship to it is necessary so that we understand what they're doing, right? And we have to have those of us who are saying, I'm going to operate outside of that. I'm going to operate beyond that. I'm not going to let that farce govern my mind, right? And which brings me to some of the other things that I think like were really important in terms of lessons from our ancestors for how we survive now.
Yeah.
I think being able to do that requires a level of spiritual rigor.
Oof.
Right? Spiritual rigor, mental and emotional rigor that many of us are not accustomed to, right? We have, I think in our social movements right now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it. In our social justice movements right now, we have a high level of reactivity and fragility on all sides.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Not a limb.
It's not a limb. It's just what we're in, right? The data says there's a high level of reactivity, a high level of defensiveness, and a high level of fragility in response to challenges.
Yes.
And that makes sense, right? Because we're living under chronically traumatic conditions, and that will promote fragility in people. But what we are called to in this moment is a level of spiritual rigor that says, I cannot be moved. I will not be moved. I will not be collapsed by my conditions, right?
Yes.
And that takes deep practice, deep practice.
Yeah. And just a word on that is, I think there's such a beautiful thing to say, I will not be collapsed and we will not be collapsed while we rest. Right?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Right? We will rest, we will stagger, we will figure all those things out. Right. Like, I think making that distinction of spiritual rigor is very different from physical overdrive or physical, right?
Yes. Right. That rest is different from collapse, actually, right? Exactly. Those are not the same thing.
Exactly.
And I think that for me, this also, that spiritual rigor for me calls to mind, the particular lineage that our work stands in, right? The lineage of Black liberation. I think we are called to have a different orientation to victory. I think about, one of the things that I think about in moments like this is like the particular story of the Montgomery bus boycott and the little known aspects of that story, right? The story that, the Montgomery bus boycott was preceded by a streetcar boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, 50 years prior, 40 years, 50 years prior. Yeah. That was a failed boycott.
Yes.
And the same church community that held a leadership role in the streetcar boycott is the church community that held a leadership role in the bus boycott 40, 50 years in the future, right? Yep. There was a process of understanding what the failures were that led to the ultimate victory that came through that particular boycott. But that victory still took over a year and a half and required that the community in Montgomery, that the Black community in Montgomery, Alabama, create an alternative economy of transportation in order for their boycott to be successful, right? And I think that to me, those kinds of stories, like, it is incumbent upon all of us as people who are either organizers or want to be organizers. And I would say, I think everyone needs to be an organizer in this moment, but it's incumbent upon us to really deeply understand the stories of our organizing history, and to know that, like, all victories happen, all of our wins happen in relationship to failures, and all of our failures happen in relationship to our wins. And that's just that's a fact of organizing. That's and right. We have to understand the moment that we are in, instead of, feeling, and so that we don't collapse under the pressure of the moment. This particular moment, political moment that we are in, is very reflective of, we were in a very similar political moment 40 years ago, right? Yep. In the aftermath of some of the major wins of the civil rights movement, we had the election of Nixon, who ran on an explicit white supremacist platform, right? And did a ton of work to dismantle the wins of the civil rights movement through a different set of legal mechanisms.
Yes.
And I think that that's what we have to have our eyes on here, that it's like, there's the farce. But what are they actually doing? What are they actually doing? What is actually happening in the Supreme Court process?
Yes.
You know, like, it's not just about this pro-abortion or anti-abortion. It's not specifically just about her abortion stance. Exactly. That's not actually the main reason why an Amy Coney Barrett is a danger to the Supreme Court. Right. There's other things going on there that make her dangerous and make her nomination process dangerous. And so I think that that's that level of analysis and that willingness to be rigorous in our analysis and rigorous in relationship to one another is part of how we get through.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Anything else in there?
I mean, there's so much else, but I know that we have to keep it moving.
Okay.
So, so I, knowing that these are some of the lessons that we've pulled from times previous to ours that we could look back on and say they're either more terrible or at least as terrible. Right.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have wisdom to offer to, I know you do. What wisdom do you have to offer to the intrepid people in this space with us right now about what our collective priorities should be in this moment?
Yes.
Knowing that the strategies of those who, wish to harm us are very intelligent, very adaptive, and in large part have to do with keeping us disconnected from one another.
That's right.
How would you define the priorities for us right now?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for that breakdown of ancestral spiritual analysis. That was great. I love that. More and more, I'm like, I think the main priority for us needs to be staying connected with each other. I said this quote a few years ago, that things are not getting worse, they're getting uncovered, and we must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. And right. I still feel that way. Right? People are like, no, this is definitely worse. And I'm like, I keep repeating this, but I'm like, it's worse relative to your privilege. So if you have a ton of privilege, this is all getting pulled back and you're like, I can't believe it. It's a racist nation, right? But
what accent is that?
Jimmy Fallon. But if you have been living under racism, or if you've lost someone that you loved, or if you've been in the world, right? If you've been an immigrant, if you've been banned, when you tried to come back home after leaving the country because blah, 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 you have already experienced that it's a racist nation, right? Or if you are, just all these rollbacks, all these things are happening and people are like, I can't believe it. That I can't believe it is a sign that you were disconnected from the suffering that was happening on your behalf and with your tax dollars. So a huge portion of it is, how do we get deeply in connection with what is, and deeply in connection with how we're participating in what is. Yeah. And then I want to think about connection on a couple of levels. One is principled struggle, staying in right relationship with each other, deep connection on that level, right? So everything that I've been thinking about and writing about around cancel culture, around not canceling each other, around staying in relationship, figuring out how we stay in right relationship, even if that means strong boundaries, even if that means accountability processes, whatever it is, that we are engaging with each other in principled struggle, that our goal is elevating the whole, that we are trying to lift ourselves and our people up out of this mess, and that we are accountable for how we show up in that struggle. So one huge portion is staying connected at that level. Like, we as a movement don't have enough people to be tossing each other away. And we need to figure out, how do we hold each other, but hold each other accountable? So that's one piece. And then the other piece is on a very material level, staying connected through the internet and through mutual aid. So you spoke about mutual aid as like a groundbreaking aspect of what happened in Minneapolis this summer. And I think it's been a groundbreaking aspect of how many of us have been surviving this pandemic, is really learning to ask for help and really learn to see our own abundance, see what we have to offer each other.
Yes.
That,
yes.
you know, Alexis Pollingham's recently said on Princess's Finding Our Way podcast, we are not individuals. And it really was just like, yes, if you haven't figured that out yet, like we are not individuals. We are always in network. And like sometimes the network is flooding with the lava heat of uprising as it did this summer. And sometimes it's flowing with depression as it has been as we head into the fall of like, it's sad, I'm tired, I don't want to wear a mask anymore, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna vote for it's right. You know, right? It's like sometimes that's what's flooding the network, right? And then sometimes it's uplifted, joy, whatever, but we're not alone in it. Alone is a myth. Alone is a story we were told that disconnected us from the sacred gift we have of actually being interconnected. So really holding on to that. And then the internet is like my fave thing. So like really figuring out,
fave thing.
You know, I love me some internet, but it's, I really love it on a lot of levels, and I'm figuring out the right relationship with it. So when I say internet, I don't just mean social media, although I like my social media.
Right? My curated social
I like
media.
my very curated social media where I only let love in and I only send love out. Like that works for me. And or solutions, not just love, but like solutions. Like I really try to uplift, like there's something horrific happening as per usual, but here's something you can do about it. Now here's an action, here's a donation, here's an education, right? But the internet, I mean, as a whole, allowing us to actually stay connected with each other. That's something our ancestors didn't have. That's something that is still really brand new to us, that we can cut through the noise of all the fake stories and we can be connected, so that right now we know that Nigeria is facing the same kind of human rights abuses from authorities that we are. And we can throw our weight behind ending SARS there, the way they have thrown their weight behind our Black Lives Matter movement here. We can support each other and we can connect that, oh, that is connected to what's happening in Palestine. We can make these lines and we can say, this story, we are not individuals, even as nations, which they try to tell us we are so different and our nation is special. And no, we're just the baby nation that's still going through all this stuff that everyone else is still dealing with. So we're all trying to figure this out. And it helps if we understand there's common threads and we can be in these conversations. And I don't know how we would have survived this pandemic without all of this capacity to be connected with each other. So I want to really uplift the work of like the Center for Media Justice, the work of Malkia Cyril, the work of people who have been fighting for us to maintain control over our internet and our right to be connected with each other, as well as people like Allied Media Projects in Detroit who've been thinking about how do we teach each other the skills to wire amongst ourselves so we are not constantly relying on corporations that don't love us and don't care about us and definitely don't want our freedom to keep us connected to each other, right? So I feel like there's those things. And then the connection we have, you mentioned intergenerational work. And the thing I want to land on is the connection we have to our children. Like right now, everyone's children are with them, right? And I think that's not an accident. I think it's not an accident that at this moment in history, suddenly we are in our homes with our children or on the phone with people whose children are right there with them through the work. And their pace and their play and their imagination and their creativity, I think it's a fundamental ingredient, right, of how we connect with each other in this time. So
I think that's beautiful. I mean, I do think since the spring, when we first moved to distance learning here in Minnesota, I noticed just like a palpable change in me and my children and our lives. And I could feel the gift of it. I mean, it's absolutely one of the most intense things that my children and I have ever been through. And we've been through a lot of really intense things in our life. This is very intense, right? Doing what we're doing. And there is this beautiful gift in this moment of, I think that the constant presence of all of us being together means that there's so much less that we can hide from our children.
Yes.
And there's so much more that they have, because the pandemic and the uprising and the election, all of it is impacting their lives very directly.
Yes.
It means that the level of conversation we have to be able to have now is so much more it's so much more intense and requires a higher level of responsibility on all sides.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing their capacity to hold complexity is growing alongside mine. So, I mean,
I love that.
It's amazing. It gives me a lot of hope for what's coming, to watch these three brilliant beings able to like really hold a lot of depth and complexity about their own lived experience once they move past the unfairness of it. That has been a gift.
Sister, I love talking to you so much. And
I love talking to you so
it's just
much.
like, it does such good things for my brain. So I think now we can go into some Q and some A, or some Q and T, questions and thoughts. If Misty will come back to us.
Hey,
hi,
Misty.
Hello, I'm back. I'm just sitting in the brilliance of all that. And it's such a joy to think about you as just present members here giving us wisdom, but also as future ancestors. So I just want to express my gratitude off the bat. And yes, there's so many wonderful questions coming through. How's everybody doing out there? Feel free to shake it out. I imagine everyone's kind of hyped up. So here we go. Let's maybe enjoy a conversation with everyone in the room. Keep the thoughts and questions coming. Wonderful, doing well. Yes. Please just talk to us. This is a question that quite a few folks were interested in hearing you address. The both of you, I know, have an interest in science fiction. This is addressed to you, Adrienne Marie, but I imagine you can share it. Could you share some of your insights into the work of Octavia Butler, in particular, The Parable of the Sower, and the connections with the current crises we are living in Butler's speculative fiction? Do you think we're on the path to the world Butler imagines? Should we all move to Acorn, or is that currently burning in a forest configuration?
Oh, God!
I didn't read that until this live moment. Last part. Wow. Please help us think through that.
Was Acorn created and then burned down in the Oregon fires?
Right. Well, I think one of the things is, I'm going to speak a little spoilerifically here, but because I don't believe Octavia's work can be spoiled. So one thing I'll say about this is I get to talk about this a lot because I'm doing Octavia's Parables, which is a podcast with Toshi Regan that's deep diving chapter by chapter into the parables.
Toshi Regan.
The unparalleled Toshi Regan.
The unparalleled Toshi Regan.
Who also sings. But one thing I'll share is we're absolutely on track for that future. Like we're doing the podcast because it's like, yeah. And even this podcast is framed inside of an Octavia Butlerian worldview. And I think one of the biggest aspects of it is the climate aspect, is that we are moving towards a situation where we will not have easy access to the basic resources that we need to survive. And the social distractive conditions that we're in right now are keeping us from attending to our shared common threat that we're all going to have to figure out how to survive. Yeah. So I would say that, and Autumn, I'd love to give you some space on this one because I literally get to talk about this all the time.
Yeah, I mean, as any of you who have listened to the podcast know, Adrienne and I are super fans of Octavia Butler's work.
Super fans.
And I think, for very legitimate reasons, the parable of the sower and the parable of the talents are getting a lot of attention, finally getting the level of attention actually that they have deserved all along. I think, was it Parable of the Sower finally made the New York Times bestseller list this year?
Finally did.
It was published in like the 80s.
Yeah, like a month ago.
So that's amazing. And I want folks to just also be aware, for people who aren't aware of Octavia Butler's work, I think it's important to note that her work, particularly the parables, really is a prophetic text for this time, and is absolutely, I invite everyone to read it, not because we want to like be fear mongers, but because she both offers like a prophecy of this time as well as a set of spiritual practices for this time. Yes. And a set of lessons for how to be in community and in relationship with one another in a time like this one. And so I think that is just important to note. And I will say that Octavia Butler wrote some just incredible books that also prophesied our survival in other ways, right? Yes. She took head on the question of climate crisis. She yes. took head on the question of violence. She took head on the question of the problem of sexual trauma, which is also endemic to our world, right? Yes. And she always would take these conversations and sort of like turn them upside down and force us to look at them through a different viewpoint, right? Like, what if like cancer is something that plagues our current world? What if an alien race came along and was like, actually, cancer is highly valuable to us and we want to blend with you because of that, yes. right? You know, she would take a different, she would force us to look at and reconsider some of the baseline assumptions we bring about what is community, what is danger, what are the actual conditions of trauma in our lives, what are the stories that we tell. And so I think there's a lot to look at and learn from in her work beyond the parables, even though the parables are most relevant right now in this moment. And I think that one of the things that's cool about her work is that she was very directly focused on agency. Yes. And, you know, her heroines are women who have a high level of agency. Yes. And a sense of responsibility for their own lives, their own survival, and the survival of those who they love. Mm-hmm. And I think that in that way, she was also inviting us into like whittling away at whatever victim mentality we may be carrying into this moment and saying like, yes, we have been victimized. Yes, we are survivors. And also we have agency. And we can, if we believe more deeply in ourselves and in our values, anything becomes possible. Yes. You know?
I love that.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. Thank you, Kaj. I didn't get to say for asking us that wonderful question. Thank you for your responses. Here's a question from Caesar. Okay. Adrienne, you wrote a very incredible piece in July on cancel culture and abolition. I found it to be transformative and helpful, but I heard you came under attack from some people. Can you talk about that piece, your forthcoming book, and how your thinking has been evolving since then? I sense that this is a topic that a lot of us are thinking about. So,
I will talk about it. So, you know, I wrote the piece. Like I said, I came back from sabbatical and I was like, what the heck is going on? And one of the what the heck things was that within like the first 2 weeks of being back, I was getting tons of like direct messages, private messages, requests to cancel people that I didn't know, cancel people that I knew but barely, cancel people that I followed, but the algorithm never actually showed me anything of theirs. You know, like it was just like to have this very strong reaction to people that and strong consequence for people that I didn't really know at all, on behalf of people that I also didn't really know at all. And it was for all kinds of offenses. And a lot of the people were in movement. And so I wrote this piece because I was like, this is not what movement is supposed to feel like. That was really the essence of what I was wanting to say, was this is not the essence of it. And the piece really resonated with a lot of people. Like it's the most read thing on my blog, and it hit a lot of bells. And I heard from a lot of people that were like, this is happening to me. This is happening in my sector. This is happening in our work. We're tearing each other apart. And it was in a lineage of writing. So I've been writing about this for years. I wrote a piece years ago called We Will Not Cancel Us. And then I wrote about transformative justice. And really, I've been trying to figure out, how do we talk about movement, relationship, and movement accountability inside the paradigm of transformative justice. So all that happened. And then a few days after, I started to hear critique, and it came in a lot of different forms. And I would say most of it wasn't attack, right? So there was definitely like a section of folks who were like, we want to break this down. We don't understand this. We are not comfortable with this. We don't like the language. So I used some very strong language in the piece that felt appropriate to me when I was writing it, felt emotionally appropriate to me when I was writing it. But that was a huge portion of the critique. And then people were like, you need to be very careful, because the same thing I was critiquing, which is like, we're collapsing all these different things and giving it all the same consequence. But even as I was writing, I was collapsing those same things. And I was not making clear that I understand those nuances, and that we all need to understand those nuances, but we need to figure out new responses. So Autumn was one of the people who helped me to understand what I wasn't seeing, because, I think one of the beautiful things about being a writer and beautiful things about being in the public sphere is you can only see so much. Like all humans can only see so much. But when you're writing and you're really in your own, you get in your channel, right? And you're like, I'm flowing down this channel. This is a righteous channel. I like where it leads. And then someone's like, girl, there's other channels. There's a lake. There's a freaking ocean. So I felt like
tributaries.
There's some tributaries, girl. We need to like flow some other ideas in there. So particularly around the language, right? As a writer, I was very defensive initially about the language choices I had made, because I was like, I don't want to back down from the language choices. And Autumn really offered me an invitation of like, you don't have to back down from the intensity of what you're talking about, but there are other metaphors that are not so regularly used by the right against us. There are other ways to speak about this. And it really helps. So the upcoming book, I really hope and pray is a reflection of all those different conversations that happened in the wake of the piece. So it includes that original, like, We Will Not Cancel Us piece, which is kind of an almost near poetic visionary text of like, it's so important to me that we don't move as if we have unlimited amounts of human beings. It's so important to me that we don't operate with a constantly shrinking concept of who's with us and who is in our camp. And that's what I see happening in our movements right now. Is it's like, you find 3 people who have the same exact precise analysis as you, and then you're using that as a place to judge everyone else. Or you just woke up, it's just like, you literally just figured out feminism or patriarchy or whatever, transphobia. And now you're hurling, you become police of that. And that policing, that, when we're talking about abolition, I'm like, we have to relinquish policing. We have to relinquish the pleasure that comes with policing, the pleasure of looking at someone and being like, I'm better than you. I've got this right and you don't. You are messed up. You are bad. You're not actually down for justice, and I am. Like, all of that has to go. It's not going to fit on the little boat that we're going to be able to move forward on. So the piece is rewritten with different metaphors. I added a section into the book that is, one of the things that I found missing was I was like looking everywhere for like, is there a good glossary for in our movement of like, here's what we mean by harm, here's what we mean by abuse, here's what we mean by this, here's what we mean by that. And I didn't find something that was like clear, easy to reference. So I didn't try to create that because I was like, that's not my specialty. But what I wrote was, here's what I mean. When I'm writing these things, here's what I mean. And I see that as kind of an invitation that for other people, when we're in these conversations, if someone says that, like, he harmed me, to be able to be like, and can we talk, what do you mean by that? Like, when you're saying harm, because what you might mean is abuse, or what you might mean is offense, or what you might mean is this is a contradiction, or this is a conflict. And what I want us to get excellent, I want us to be elegant at conflict. I want us to be great at principled struggle and generative conflict. And I want us to be constantly growing our skill at holding each other accountable. That when someone does cause harm, all the different kinds of levels of harm, when someone causes harm, that we have tools in our community for what we do, and that we're not just constantly pushing people to some other community where they will keep doing whatever they've done and eventually land in the state's hands if it's egregious enough, right? Which is what happens now. I'll say this, it's a long answer, but it's a big thing. And of course, this book is coming out basically this month. So I'm like, I really want it to be considered well. I really want people to read it, and not necessarily to like it, but I want it to get people into the same conversations that I got to be in all summer. That's like, what do we mean by these things? What is our stance on these things? And if we are abolitionists, what are we willing to practice every day with each other? And I'm, when you talk about spiritual rigor, Autumn, I feel like this has been my spiritual rigor practice this summer, has been like, totally. Okay, I don't want to be canceled, and I don't want to cancel anyone else. I don't want to cut people off, and I don't want to be cut off. I want to be in right relationship with people. And I have to recognize that there's a lot of ways of being abolitionist right now. And that's what I want us to be unsurfacing. It's like, how do we bring that up, or surfacing? How do we bring up to the surface? What is the word for the word? And what was the thing I was like, and also to not, like, I don't want us to be indulging abuse. I don't want the thing to be like, if you don't ride for it exactly this way, you're indulging abuse. So to me, I'm trying to open up the door for saying, actually, like in every community, there needs to be people who support those who are causing harm so that they can break the patterns and we don't just end up in these same patterns. And there needs to be those who are supporting survivors. And we need to figure out, which role are you well suited to, right? When someone gets called out, there needs to be like, okay, here's the committee. Someone just got called out. We're going to show up and make sure that they can't disappear. They won't disappear. How are we going to make sure that when they don't disappear, what they become, what they grow into, is something that belongs to us, right? So it's really scholarship of belonging, always. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I wonder, because so much in that and it's being put in our chat box, I love this notion of elegant conflict, and language and ideas around who's with us and the problematics of that, but also working together and so forth. And I'm curious, how do you think about boundaries within that too? So in our work of working together and building solidarity and so forth, how do both of you also navigate thinking about boundaries?
Favorite topic of the moment.
I know. I love boundaries so much.
Yes. I think, I guess what I'll say about this to begin, and then I want to just hand it to you, Adrienne, too, because I feel like this is something that Adrienne and I talk. We basically talk about boundaries like every day. I feel like in our private chat, it's just like, how's your boundaries?
How's your boundaries?
I feel like one of my lessons of my life over the last few years has been that, speaking of boundaries, ding ding, has been that you can't have boundaries without a sovereign sense of I. You can't really have or know what your boundaries are without a sovereign sense of yourself. And that is a very hard, that's a hard journey. It can be painful to figure out, who are you yourself in relationship to others, not who are you blended with others, or who are you compared to others, right? And I think that, many of us are socialized to understand ourselves primarily in comparison or blended with, and not in relationship to other people. And I think that for me, it's been that journey of really becoming familiar with myself and being able to sense my own emotions and my own experiences and my own truth. It's through that sense making of myself that I am now able to have boundaries with others. And because doing that sense making of myself has helped me figure out with greater clarity where my, what is my yes? What is my no? When do I feel a full body yes to something? And when do I feel a full body no? Or when am I feeling oh, I need more information. I need more information. I don't know about that. That's what people in the Midwest say. If they disagree with something, they say, I don't know about that.
I don't know about that.
So I think that I think that, and boundaries are like, it's lifelong work. It's not like you figure it out and then, you're good. It's more like you learn to be able to notice, for me, the journey has involved learning to notice where a boundary is needed. Yes. I have to notice that first before I learn how to articulate what it is and how to articulate it with like love for myself and love for another person so that it doesn't come out sideways. Because I think that historically it was more that by the time I even realized that there was a need for a boundary, my boundary had already been violated so many times that I couldn't then articulate it without it coming out sideways or without it being hostility. Yeah. And so what I think I'm learning now in my life is to notice where a boundary is needed and to get better at articulating that as quickly as possible and trusting, that the other person who I'm articulating it to can handle me being an adult,
That's right. Sister, I love that.
It's like, I'm gonna be an adult and you're going to handle it.
And it's gonna be okay at the end. Yeah, because I feel two things about this. One is I feel like a lot of the calls for cancellation are actually related to boundaries. And it's actually when people need a boundary and they're saying, I need this person to not be able to just be in my face, be on my screen, be in my life. And I don't know how else to ask for that. And then that turns into this. It's like, no one should see this person. No one should ever know this person exists. Right. And in that disappearance, sometimes people are pushed towards accountability and a lot of times not. So the boundary to me is a way of learning to articulate the boundary. It's like, oh, actually, I need this boundary. And what would it look like to live inside that boundary? And do I trust this other person to be able to honor my boundaries or not? Because I can say a boundary and someone can't be ready to participate in holding that. And then I need community support. And then, you figure that out. I'm the kind of person who had to learn boundaries through group process. So I had to have, okay. I was like, I can help other people have boundaries, but when it comes to my personal boundaries, I need a squad and I need a team that I check in with. I'm like, this just happened. And then all of them are like, hell no. And I'm like, oh, so that would be a boundary.
Right. That would be a boundary.
Okay. All right. So great. Right. And I think that's the part of me that is strong. The part of me that is a great facilitator is the part of me that is able to flow and kind of octopus out and kind of feel a lot more than I can explain how I can feel it. And there's all this stuff that happens that is good news, but then I've had to, as my adulting process has been learning, like, how do I be a boundaried octopus? How do I be someone who can really let yours be yours and mine be mine?
Yes.
And the other piece of this I'll say is even the process of giving advice. So my friend Malkia has been teaching me this lately, that I grew up, and probably in our sister friendship, you have definitely experienced this, is if someone says something to me, I'm like, I will fix you. And I will...
You Virgo, you.
I will offer you advice because obviously that's what you need right now because you said a thing. And so I know what that means, right? And one of my big lessons has been, everyone who is expressing themselves is not asking for my advice because my advice is actually a way that I'm offering my judgment, that I know something about this that's better than what you know. And I think that kind of thing also plays out to the level of conflict and trauma and all this stuff, because we are judging each other all the time. We are giving each other all kinds of stuff without consent. We are crossing each other's boundaries all the time and not knowing how in an interaction be like, I didn't actually ask for advice right now. So, one thing with Autumn and I think I can say this, that we've been getting better at is I've been trying to say, what kind of support do you need right now? Like,
yes,
how do you want to be listened to right now? And try to find that out, because if I don't ask for that guideline, that I ask you for the boundary, my nature as a big sister is to just push in and be like, here's how I can fix this. And then it's both of us learning to then be like, oh, and here's what it is. Right. Like, and me
learning to trust that, like, trust myself and knowing what I actually need in that moment.
Yes.
Which has also been like a huge growth arc, right? Of being like,
exactly.
Oh, I need to complain. That's it. That's all
exactly.
I need.
Right? I'm like, oh, like, I don't ever, I was like, that doesn't occur to me to just, I'm like, that's great. Like, that's been a liberating thing. Like, sometimes you just complain and you don't have
complaining is amazing.
Right. Or, it's that movie, what's that movie with the Inside Out, right? Where it's just like, sometimes you just need to be sad and someone just needs to sit with you while you're sad. And I'm always like, I see that you're sad, and here's how we could make it so you're never sad again, which is not actually possible, but that's what I'm thinking. So I feel like so much of this is like, it's really, really basic, and it takes incredible rigor every day to start to drop into the honesty that you have to be in with yourself and others, to articulate the boundaries you need, to articulate the help you need.
Yeah. And, to tie a neat little bow on it here at the last moment of our time with you all.
Yes.
It's not an accident that we struggle so much with boundaries.
Not at all.
Because we live in a police state. And so it's like, when you live under these kinds of oppressive systems, part of how we all learn to navigate living inside of these oppressive systems is through some level of dissociation, so that we're not having to notice the boundary violations as often, right? It's how we're all using these surveillance devices without realizing that we're being surveilled. Yes. Even though we're signing
or even
documents,
opting into it.
We're opting in. We're saying, yes, give it to me. Like, what? I don't care.
I'll
like, give you all
Alexa, please surveil me.
Right. So, we're opting into a lot of these kinds of experiences without really thinking about it. Yep. And so that's part of the boundaries work too, of just being like, there's maybe quite a lot in my life that's going to have to shift.
Yes.
What's the first boundary I can set?
Beautiful.
Like, let's just start one at a time.
That's beautiful. Thank you, sister. That was
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our show. And thanks again to the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies program at Dartmouth College. We are on Twitter and Instagram at End of the World PC. We're also on Facebook at End of the World Show. You can make a sustaining donation to our show by visiting our page at patreon.com/endoftheworldshow. Another incredibly helpful thing you can do to help our show sustain itself is write us a review on Apple Podcast if you're an iPhone person. How to Survive the End of the World is produced and edited by the incomparable Zach Rosen. And music for today's show comes from Tunde Lanaran and Mother Cyborg and Chad Crouch. Thank you.